You don't have to keep doing this, you know? The old woman looked up from her cup, both hands wrapped around it the way people hold things they don't want to let go of, and blinked at Piper Holt with eyes that were gray and deep and quietly tired. Doing what, dear? Coming in on days when it's cold enough to stay home, Piper said, sliding into the chair across from her for just a moment, the way she always did between the morning rush and the lunch crowd. I worry about you walking from the bus stop. The woman, Dorothea Vance, 78 years old, white hair pinned neatly at her neck, smiled the slow smile of someone who had long since made peace with being worried about. I come, she said simply, because here is the only place that still feels like somewhere. Piper didn't say anything. She just refilled the cup without being asked. That was how it had started, 8 months ago. Dorothea had walked into Linden Street Cafe on a gray October morning, ordered a small coffee, and when she reached into her coat pocket, realized she'd left her wallet at home. She'd apologized with the particular dignity of an elderly person who hates to be a burden and started to rise. Piper had said quietly, "Sit down, it's already made," and she'd set the cup in front of her and gone back to work. Dorothea had come back the next day, and the day after that. Piper never charged her, not once. Her manager, a distracted man named Greg who cared primarily about inventory, never noticed. And even if he had, Piper had long since decided it was worth whatever consequence followed. Piper Holt was 26 years old. She had a studio apartment 12 minutes from the cafe, a shelf of half-read books, and a quiet, persistent dream of one day opening her own place, something small and warm and honest, where people could sit as long as they needed without feeling like they owed the room something. She had no savings to speak of, no investor, no plan beyond the dream itself, but she had the kind of character that makes dreams feel like inevitabilities rather than wishes. She learned Dorothea slowly, the way you learn someone when you only have small windows of time. She learned that Dorothea had been a school teacher for 31 years, that she'd raised her son Callum alone after her husband left when Callum was 9, that she was proud of Callum in a way that also quietly ached, because he was successful and busy and called every Sunday, but hadn't visited in 4 months. She learned that Dorothea talked about her late neighbor, Mrs. Farley, the way people talk about their closest friend, and that Mrs. Farley had passed in the spring, and that this cafe, this cup, this chair, this young woman who sat across from her between rushes, this had become the architecture of her days. One Tuesday in June, Dorothea didn't come. Piper told herself it meant nothing. People miss days. But she found herself watching the door with a low, unspoken worry she couldn't reason away. By Thursday, she asked her coworker Bree if she knew anything. By Friday, she'd looked up the address Dorothea had once mentioned, Clover Lane, the yellow house, and on her lunch break, she walked there. Dorothea answered the door in her housecoat, pale and slower than usual. A minor illness, she said, nothing serious. But her eyes filled when she saw Piper standing on the step holding a paper bag with 2 muffins and a sealed cup of coffee. You walked here on your break? Dorothea said. It wasn't a question. It's 12 minutes. The coffee's still warm. Dorothea pressed her hand over her mouth for just a moment. Then she stepped back and let her in. They sat at the kitchen table. Piper had 40 minutes and stayed every one of them. She didn't know, sitting in that warm, yellow kitchen, that this visit had mattered in a way that would outlast everything she currently understood about her own life. 3 months later, on a Wednesday morning in September, a man Piper had never seen came into the cafe. He was 33, well-dressed in a quiet way, and he stood at the counter with an expression that was composed, but carrying something heavy behind it. He asked if she was Piper Holt. She said yes. He introduced himself as Callum Vance.
Dorothea had passed 11 days ago, he said, peacefully, at home, in her sleep. He was handling her affairs, and there was a letter. Piper sat down on the stool behind the counter because her legs made the decision before her mind could. Callum placed an envelope on the counter, cream-colored, her name written in Dorothea's careful schoolteacher script, and stepped back to give her space. Inside, in 2 pages of the most deliberate handwriting Piper had ever seen, Dorothea explained that she had owned the building on Linden Street for 22 years, that the cafe was a tenant, not an owner, that she had 18 months ago updated her will, and that she was leaving the building, the whole building, to Piper. Not because she had no one else, but because Piper had walked 12 minutes on a lunch break to bring warm coffee to someone the world had mostly stopped noticing, because she had sat across that small table again and again, not out of pity, but out of genuine interest in another person's life. Because, Dorothea wrote in her steady hand, you showed me what I hoped still existed, a young person who gives without calculation. The cafe needs someone like you. It has always needed someone like you. Piper read the letter twice. Then she looked up at Callum, who was watching her with eyes that held both grief and something that looked like relief, the relief of a son who had not been there enough, and now had proof that his mother had not been alone. She talked about you every Sunday, he said quietly. She said you were the best part of her week. Piper couldn't speak for a moment. When she could, she said only, she was the best part of mine. She didn't take the building without complication or question. She met with Callum and an attorney twice. She asked careful questions. She made sure it was real and right and legal and fair. And when it was settled, she gave her notice at the cafe, spent 4 months in careful preparation, and reopened the space as her own, a small place, warm and unhurried, with a corner table by the window, and a standing policy that the first cup was always free. She named it Dorothea's. Kindness rarely announces its return. It doesn't come back with fanfare or on any schedule you expect. It simply comes back, in a letter, in a name above a door, in a cup of coffee still warm from a 12-minute walk. What Piper gave was small. What it meant was immeasurable. That is almost always how it works. Give without calculation. You never know what you're building. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.